Hello and welcome to the Chatterbox Letters podcast. Today I will be doing a special presentation. Again, today I will be reading my self-published book back, The Minorities, the Pilot, Chapter 5. I hope that everyone will enjoy listening to me while I read to you The Minorities, the Pilot. All right. Chapter 5, Richard's Revenge on Sarah. The next morning at Middleton High, Sarah was at her locker. She retrieved some books she needed for her first period class. Richard approached Sarah from behind. He pressed up close behind her. He was very angry with Sarah. Richard shouted into Sarah's ear in haste. He was very angry with Sarah for embarrassing him in front of his parents about her pregnancy. Emily and Denise stood off from a distance as they watched and overheard Richard threatening Sarah about what had occurred at his house. "You think that you can embarrass me in front of my parents like that, Sarah?" Richard grabbed Sarah by the arm as hard as he could. He leaned over her shoulder into her face. "You made me look stupid. I was looking like I was a heel. You made me feel like an idiot right in front of my parents." Richard threatened Sarah in haste. "Do you know I could kill you right now?" Sarah feared for her safety and her life at that particular moment. She looked away from Richard as she trembled with fear. Sarah responded to Richard's threats against her. "Richard, I wasn't trying to make you look stupid or like a heel or an idiot in front of your parents. I was only trying to make you take responsibility of the situation we both created. We got a baby growing inside of me. All I wanted for you to do is take responsibility for the baby. I'm sorry, but you're taking it the wrong way." Richard stared at Sarah with a look that can kill a tick. "Yeah, I bet you're sorry. You're embarrassing me in front of my parents." Richard pressed up against Sarah again. He leaned over her shoulder into her face again. He threatened Sarah. "Sarah, no one, and I mean no one, embarrasses me ever. You hear me, Sarah? No one gets away with that with me. Who do you think you are, Sarah? I am going to let you know this for sure. You're mine. Understand that fully. All of you. You're mine. Always watch your back, Sarah, in all directions." Sarah was shaken with fear. She was very afraid for her safety and her life. She responded to Richard's threats once again. "Are you threatening me, Richard?" "I'm not threatening you, Sarah. I'm telling you, don't forget who you're dealing with, baby. I will hurt you. Remember that." Richard walked off while looking back at Sarah in haste. Emily and Denise ran up to a frightened and shaken Sarah. They gave her guarded moral support after they heard Richard threatening her. Denise was the most concerned about Sarah. "We heard Richard threaten you, Sarah. Are you all right? Denise questioned Sarah, fearing for her friend's life. Sarah assured Denise that she was fine after receiving Richard's threats towards her. Don't worry about me, Denise. I'm fine, no problem. He's just Mr. Big Shot. A worried Emily gave Sarah some words of advice about Richard and the threat he made against her. Okay, next page. Sarah, I don't think so. He didn't look or sound like he was sympathetic to you or the baby and the situation you're in with him. He looked and sounded like he wanted to hurt you, Sarah. Richard wanted to hurt you really bad. Emily tried to warn Sarah about Richard's anger and threats he made against her. Denise agreed with Emily's advice to Sarah about Richard's threats towards her. I agree with you, Emily. You can't play around with someone like Richard, Sarah. He's evil. The way he looked at you gave me the bad chills throughout my body. He's a total scumbag, Sarah. You don't play around with guys like that. I'm serious about this, Sarah. Everything is going to be fine, Emily, Denise. You see? Stop staring at me. He can't do anything to me with everyone standing around. His parents promised me nothing will happen to me. Richard is just blowing off steam. He'll get over it. We've been through this before. Richard has never hit me before when we were going together. Worried and scared for Sarah, Emily decided to walk home with Sarah after school as a precaution and for her safety. Emily feared that Richard could be anywhere and he would harm Sarah. Maybe one of us or both of us should walk home with you today, Sarah, just in case Richard tries something. I'm scared and worried about you, Sarah. You're taking this out of proportion, Emily, Denise, the both of you. I know you mean well. I'll be all right. Please, Emily and Denise, don't worry about this. I'll be fine. You'll see. Sarah turned and walked away from Emily and Denise. Denise called out to Sarah, fearing for the inevitable. Denise ran part of the way behind Sarah. She called out to Sarah again. Sarah, Sarah, wait a minute, Sarah. Sarah looked back for a brief moment to look at her friend, Emily and Denise. She turned around and continued to walk home. Sarah, in fact, refused to listen to the inevitable about Richard from her friends, Emily and Denise. Concerned for Sarah's well-being and safety, Emily conversed with Denise in the school courtyard about Sarah shutting them out from protecting her from Richard. What are you going to do about Sarah, Denise? She's not listening to either one of us about Richard. We all talked about this over the phone last night. Why is she doing this? Disappointed with attitude about Richard and turning a deaf ear to the situation with Richard. Denise tried to determine what changed Sarah's mind about Richard's demands and threats against her by Richard. I don't know, Emily. Something must have happened when Sarah got off the phone last night. Maybe something must have happened on her way to school. I don't know, Emily. Denise tried to determine the fate of Sarah's decision making when it comes to Richard and his threats against Sarah. Emily gave Denise an ultimatum to wait for in the courtyard after school. We need to wait for Sarah in the courtyard after school, Denise. I don't trust Richard lurking around this school and this courtyard for a second. We both need to be there for Sarah at the end of the day for Sarah. Even if she doesn't listen to reason with us, we owe Sarah that as our friend. All right, Emmy, let's do it. Meet me right here in the courtyard today after school. Sarah will be here too. I know she will. Emily, Denise went their separate ways until school ended. It was the afternoon. School ended with the last bell ringing. The entire school student body filled the courtyard behind the school. Emily and Denise met out on the courtyard as planned. They waited patiently for Sarah to show so they can walk home together. Emily looked around for Sarah in the crowds of students and teachers. Well, we'll stand here, Denise, and wait for Sarah to show up so we can all walk home together. All right, so we can all walk home together. Emily looked around for Sarah in the crowds of students and teachers. We'll stand here, Denise, and wait for Sarah to show up so we can all walk home together. I really hope Sarah show up, Denise. Denise looked around the courtyard for Sarah. She didn't feel or the atmosphere. It felt like it was something bad was about to happen. Emily, I don't like the atmosphere around here, not one bit. I fear Richard is haunting this entire courtyard. I think about, okay, next page. The way he threatened Sarah this morning, he really scares me to the quick. I know what you mean, Denise. I feel it too. Emily was worried. She looked around fiercely for Sarah. Emily called out for Sarah several times. Emily saw Sarah from a distance in the crowd of students and teachers. She called out to Sarah once again. Emily waved from a distance for Sarah to come over where she and Denise was located in the courtyard. Sarah, please, over here, over here. Denise called out to Sarah again. Sarah, over here. Sarah saw Emily and Denise waving for her to come over to them. She emerged out of the crowds of students and teachers. She was still shaken with fear from Richard's threats against her earlier that morning at her locker. She didn't show any fear or was shaken in front of her friends about what happened earlier that morning at her locker with Richard. She refused not to let what happened bother her any further that day. "Hey, Emily, Denise, are you both still worried about what happened this morning with Richard?" Worried and confused, Emily conversed with Sarah about the actions about Richard's and his threats against her. "Sarah, Denise, and I are trying to help you. I didn't like the way Richard was looking at you this morning when he threatened you and the way he threatened you. Richard scares me, Sarah." Emily continued to turn a deaf ear to her friend, the man, and Richard's threats against her. "Come on, Emily. We've been through this before this morning, Richard. He wouldn't hurt me like that. He's harmless. We talked about this briefly last night on the phone. He's harmless. He acted like a wimp in front of his parents." Denise revealed to Emily and Sarah about her thoughts about what they talked about on the phone. "Well, Sarah, Emily, last night was different in a whole lot of ways. I thought about it, Sarah. I thought about you after we all got off the phone last night. And we talked about what happened at the Morris's house, and then this morning. Then Richard threatens you." Sarah looked at Denise with a straight and worried look on her face. "Okay, Denise, I'll take this situation into consideration, I promise you. I'm going to walk home. Nothing bad is going to happen to me. His dad and my dad promise that he will not do me or the baby any harm or trash me verbally around the school anywhere else." Emily suggested to Sarah about walking home with her. "Sarah, us walk home with you." Sarah turned to Emily and assured that she would be fine walking home from the courtyard. "Emily, I'm fine. I think I can walk home without getting hurt. I'll see you both later on, and I love you both. I'll call you." Alone and shaken, Sarah was really frightened by the possibilities that Richard could be anywhere. She ultimately decided to walk home alone instead. Emily and Denise continued to worry about Sarah as they watched her walk home alone from the courtyard. Emily gave Sarah her last warning about Richard. "Sarah, please be careful. Look around you at all times. If you see Richard, scream out loud as possibly as you could. Please be careful and take care of yourself. Please call us when you arrive home." Sarah looked at Emily and Denise and made a promise that she would contact them when she arrived home. "I promise, Emily, I promise." Sarah walked farther and farther away from the school courtyard. Emily and Denise could not see her anymore. They was very concerned about Sarah and her safety and well-being, even if they didn't follow their own advice and walked home with her. 10 minutes, into her walk, Sarah became shaken and unaware of her surroundings. She was confused with fear. She tried not to visualize the possible whereabouts of Richard and where he might turn up while she walked home alone. Sarah tried not to think of Richard or his threats against her earlier. And then all. Okay, next page. All of a sudden, and without a doubt, Sarah was spotted by Richard and his friends Kevin Osborne and Luther Rollins. Richard was very belligerent when he yelled out to Sarah, "Sarah, you're mine, Sarah." Richard fiercely rushed up to Sarah. He confronted her with the intentions of harming her. Sarah completely stopped in her tracks. She feared the inevitable as she feared for her life, knowingly she would in fact be harmed by Richard. Sarah slowly walked around Richard. She walked quickly and didn't look back. Richard stopped Sarah in her tracks again. Sarah looked into Richard's eyes. She was very silent and still was confused with fear. Sarah finally asked Richard about his intentions about harming her. "Richard, what do you want with me? I'm sorry for what happened at your parents' house. I'm sorry if I embarrassed you in front of them, but it is what it is." Richard stared at Sarah like Medusa. It was a very scary stare, like he wanted to turn Sarah and their unborn baby into stone. "I want you, Sarah. I want all of you." Richard started attacking Sarah, beating her about the face. She tried to run away. Richard caught up with Sarah. She tried once again to defend herself and her unborn baby she was carrying from extremely hard blows that Richard was inflicting upon her face and body in a violent rage. Richard was filled with rage with Sarah ever since she and her father Paul came to his house to reveal to his parents, Eddie and Charlotte, about her pregnancy. Richard continued to take his rage out on Sarah from the embarrassment that he sustained from revealing her pregnant to Richard's parents. Emily kept fighting and trying to defend herself and her unborn baby from Richard's blows. That was continuously inflicted on her. Sarah yelled out to Richard, frantically fearing for her life and her unborn baby. "Stop it, Richard. What are you doing?" Sarah screamed out very loud. No one heard Sarah screaming for her life. "You're hurting me, Richard. The baby, Richard. Stop it." Sarah yelled frantically for someone to come and help her. Richard's friends, Kevin and Luther, cowardly ran away, leaving Sarah to defend for herself against Richard. "Someone help me, please, someone help me." Richard continued fiercely pounding on Sarah like she was a punching bag with no remorse for her or their baby. Sarah was on the ground. She was in a lot of pain from the blows and punches in the face and body she sustained from Richard. 10 minutes after Sarah left the courtyard of the school, Emily and Denise felt guilty for not walking home with Sarah. They left the school courtyard to catch up to Sarah on our way home. I don't know, Denise. Maybe we should have gone with Sarah no matter what she said, or even if she didn't think or believe she was in danger from that creep Richard. Emily responded as she looked around for Sarah. Denise acknowledged to Emily about Richard's evil ways. I've always known that something was not right with Richard from the start. What a creep. I swear, Emily, Denise replied. Denise, I just can't understand why Sarah was acting like nothing we said over the phone or here at the school mattered. Emily said while looking around for Sarah. I guess Sarah has turned a blind eye to the fact that Richard was dangerous. Of course he's going to act like a wimp in front of his parents, as Sarah states, but when Richard is alone. Emily quickly interrupted Denise. He's going to act out his anger and aggression for Sarah because he's embarrassed him in front of his parents. He said that she made him look like an idiot and a heel. Denise, I truly believe he will get revenge on Sarah if he hasn't already. Oh, Emily, let's hurry up and catch up with Sarah. It's only been a short time since she left the courtyard. We need to get to her before Richard does. Okay, next page. I hear you, Denise, but I already think it's too late. 10 minutes is a very short time, but that's too long for me to even think that Sarah's okay, because Richard could be anywhere. Emily and Denise started looking for Sarah again. Let's go, Denise. Emily and Denise rushed from the courtyard to catch up with Sarah. They called out to Sarah. Emily and Denise looked around. They saw no trace of their friend Sarah anywhere in sight. Emily panicked. I don't see Sarah anywhere, Denise. This is the route she takes every single day when she walks home from school from the courtyard. Denise panicked. Emily and Denise began their search for their friend Sarah. They looked around every corner for at least 3 blocks. Still, there was no trace of Sarah. Both Emily and Denise continued to call out for Sarah. She was nowhere to be found. Not a single trace of Sarah. Emily looked in the bushes and everywhere she could think about looking. Denise and Emily went to their first house they came in contact with. Denise walked towards the house where she saw an old woman sitting out her home watching TV. She knocked at the old woman's door in order to get her attention. The old woman got up to open the front door to a panicked Denise. Hello, I need your help if you don't mind. I really need your help. I need you to call the police, ma'am. Little lady, what's going on? Emily was panicking. Emily answered the old woman about the disappearance of their friend Sarah. Emily questioned the old woman about her friend Sarah. My friend and I are wondering if you've seen a pregnant girl walk by your house earlier. We think she may be in trouble. She has a very violent boyfriend who wants to hurt her. Our friend is missing. We need you to call the police, please. The old woman did not hesitate. She picked up her telephone and she immediately called the police after she was informed by Emily and Denise about their friend Sarah's disappearance. Okay, little ladies, I called 911 for the police. Denise proceeded to look around for Sarah. Oh my God, where Sarah could be. Emily fiercely looked around for Sarah, still no trace of her. I don't think she couldn't have gotten this far, especially in her condition. We should have walked home with Sarah, Emily. Denise blamed herself. What kind of friends are we to Sarah to let her walk home alone, knowing that Richard had threatened to hurt her earlier during the day? I think we both need to share the blame for this one. Emily agreed with Denise about sharing the blame for Sarah's disappearance. There is no way of putting this, said Denise. We should have walked home with Sarah. Denise started backtracking for Sarah's path. Emily, I think I'm going to backtrack. I'm going to look for Sarah a little farther down until the police arrive. Emily agreed. I'll stay here until Sarah, if she turns up, or police arrive. Please let me know if you find something, Denise, okay? Okay, Emily. Denise started her own search party for Sarah before the police arrived. Meanwhile, at the old woman's house, the old woman questioned Emily about Sarah in order to determine the route she'd take every day. The old lady asked Emily questions about her friend Sarah. Your friend, what did you say her name was? Does she take this route on her way home every single day? Her name is Sarah, and yes, madam, she takes this route every single day. She lives just a few blocks from your house. Emily replied to the old woman. I usually sit at the window. I watch my television and sometimes I'll take a brief glance out my window and I usually see a young lady pass by my house. She looks to be your age. She walks past my house every single day. She will also wave. Okay, next page. When she passes by. Today of all days, I didn't see her walk past my house today. Maybe she could be your friend we're talking about. Emily took the old woman's words of consideration. She had a thought about Sarah's whereabouts. Oh, my Lord, my friend Denise is out right now, backtracking, looking around for our friend Sarah. She might be hurt, and we maybe have passed along the way and didn't see her. Oh my God. Denise was looking around in the bushes for anything that didn't belong there. Just blocks from the old woman's house, Denise saw some school books under a bush. She decided to look around into the bushes mysteriously. They were, in fact, Sarah's school books. Denise panicked. She was very upset and afraid what she might discover besides Sarah's school books. Denise ran back to the old woman's house. She yelled out for Emily to come and take a look at what she found in the bushes, a blocks from the old lady's house. Emily ran to the location where Denise found Sarah's school books under the bushes. Emily questioned Denise about Sarah's school books and no trace of Sarah. "Oh my God, did you find Sarah? Did you see anything else, Denise?" Denise replied to Emily. "No, Emily." Denise was in tears. "I didn't see anything else. I saw only Sarah's school books in the bushes, but I didn't see Sarah. Oh my God, where is Sarah?" Both Denise and Emily embraced each other. They were worried they would never see Sarah hurt or alive. The police arrived almost immediately after the old woman called emergency 911. The first officer on location was Officer Dunleavy. He pursued the case for missing Sarah Langston. Officer Dunleavy introduced himself to Emily and Denise and the old woman. "Hello, I am Officer Dunleavy. Someone called and reported a missing person." The officer questioned Emily and Denise and the old woman. The old woman answered the officer's question. "I did, officer. I made the call. These ladies said their friend is missing." The old woman pointed out Emily and Denise to the officer, Dunleavy, about their missing friend Sarah. The officer questioned Emily first about Sarah. "What happened here?" Officer Dunleavy questions Emily. The old woman said that your friend is missing. "What her name?" Emily answered the officer's question, identifying her friend Sarah to our officer. "Her name is Sarah Langston, officer. She was walking home from school from the courtyard. She left about 10 minutes before my friend and I left the school courtyard." Denise disclosed to Officer Dunleavy about the threats Richard made to Sarah earlier, just before school started. "Sarah had an accident this morning with her boyfriend, Richard Morris. He verbally threatened her with the intentions of hurting her in the worst way possible. He really wanted to hurt our friend, officer. He made me shake like I was in fear for my life." "Who is this boyfriend?" Officer Dunleavy questioned Denise. "His name is Richard Morris," Denise replied to the officer. Emily interrupted the officer's line of questioning with her friend Denise. "Officer Dunleavy, Sarah's boyfriend Richard said that she embarrassed and made him look like an idiot in front of his parents. Our friend Sarah is pregnant. She told his parents about her pregnancy yesterday at his house. This morning he felt threatened by what she said to his parents and decided he would pay her back by beating the ever-loving tar out of her just for embarrassing him in front of his parents about her pregnancy. That is what this is all about. Denise added more commentary to Richard's verbal threats he made to Sarah during the morning before classes administered. He said no one threatens him at any time. No one. Richard also said to our friend Sarah that she belonged with him. It was like no one else could have her or going to ever have her, ever. It was the way he said it, very cold and evil, something like that. Denise remembered seeing Sarah's school books in the bushes. She informed Officer Dunleavy of her mysterious findings. Oh, I forgot, Officer Dunleavy. I went out to look for Sarah 1 or 2 blocks back. I found some of her school books in the bushes. All right. But no sight of Sarah. I decided not to touch anything. I didn't want to include my fingerprints on the evidence, but I had to look to see if, in fact, those were my friend's school books. Denise started to panic again about what she had done. Officer, I had to look in the books to see if they are, in fact, hers, Denise said to the officer. You shouldn't have touched those books. Did you walk anywhere else around that scene? The officer replied to Denise as he touched base the importance, if in fact, of the crime scene. No, sir, I didn't. I'll show you where I found Sarah's books. Officer Dunleavy informed the girls once again about the importance of the crime scene before leaving to investigate its location. Okay, little lady, let's take a ride to the scene. Be careful when we arrive there. I don't want you girls near anyway or around the scene, even the bushes. Understand me, ladies, there could be footprints, DNA, and other materials scattered around the location where the books were found. I don't want them disturbed. Understand me? Let's go. Officer Dunleavy and the girls arrived at the scene where Denise found Sarah's school books. The officer exited the police cruiser to take a look around the scene where Sarah's school books were spotted in the bushes. Officer Dunleavy discovered Sarah 2 yards over from her school books were located. Sarah was partially lying under a large bush. Officer Dunleavy was startled about his discovery of Sarah. Sweet holy Jesus, it's your friend Sarah. Emily was totally shocked at what she saw. She began to run when Sarah was spotted. Officer Dunleavy grabbed Emily by the arms. He stopped her from running towards the bush where Sarah was located in order to keep the crime scene from being disturbed. Sarah, is she dead? Emily shouted out in fear that Sarah might be dead. No, don't go over there. I got to close off this area. I got to call for backup. Do not go past this area, miss. I'm going to check to see if your friend is still alive. Stay here. Officer Dunleavy taped the area with the police caution tape to prevent anyone from crossing over and contaminating the crime scene. Officer Dunleavy walked over to Sarah. He saw that she was brutally beaten about the face and almost the entire body. Officer Dunleavy became emotionally disturbed by Sarah's appearance. He remained alert, holding back emotions about and after he had seen. It was his job to do so under any circumstances. Sarah's appearance nearly took toll on Officer Dunleavy and his way of thinking. Denise and Emily were already emotional after seeing Sarah in the condition she was in. They feared for the worst for Sarah. Emily demanded answers from the officer about Sarah's condition. Officer Dunleavy, is Sarah alive? Please tell me if she's okay. Officer Dunleavy leaned over and checked with Sarah's pulse. She seems all right. Her pulse is very strong, and that's a good thing. We don't know anything else until she is stabilized and ready to be transported to the hospital. She is alive. I'm going to radio for a paramedic. I would like you ladies to please be out of the way when the paramedic arrives to the crime scene. We'll need the room to get to the crime scene. The paramedics arrived within minutes to the crime scene to transport Sarah to a local hospital for treatment. The paramedics carefully placed Sarah on the stretcher and into the ambulance. Shocked with disbelief, Emily noticed the brutality of Sarah's face and body. She was filled with black and bruises, and a busted lip, and 2 black eyes. Emily cried out to Sarah in disbelief. "Oh, my Lord, Sarah, what did Richard do to you? My God, Sarah." Slightly conscious, Sarah muffled under her voice in total and extreme agony from the brutal beating at the hands of Richard. It was Richard. It was Richard. Sarah looked over at her friends Emily and Denise. She apologized to both girls for not letting them walk and follow her home from the schoolyard. Okay, next page. Officer Dunleavy questioned Sarah without hesitation in order to get a statement about the brutality of her beating involving Richard. Officer Dunleavy filed a report before Sarah was sedated and transported to the hospital. Sarah, can you answer some more questions? This would only take a brief moment of your time, then I'll let the paramedics transfer you immediately to the hospital. I just need some information concerning your brutal beating involving your boyfriend, Richard Morris. Sarah struggled in extreme agony from her bruises that were inflicted on her face and body in order to answer Officer Dunleavy's question to the best of her knowledge. Sarah continued to struggle as she muffled under her voice to Officer Dunleavy's question. Yes, officer, I will answer. I want you to get Richard. He hurt me. He hurt me very bad. He hurt me. Sarah, what I need to know from you before I let the paramedics transport you to the hospital. I need to know where this Richard Morris lives. Can you tell me his address so I can go and pick him up? Sarah muffled. 574 Oakley. Okay, Sarah, I'm going to let the paramedic transport you to the hospital now. I will be picking up Richard Morris at his address you've given me. Thanks for your cooperation. Be well, Sarah. Denise climbed into the ambulance with Sarah. She was immediately transported to the hospital. I'm riding with Sarah to the hospital. What you gonna do, Emily? Denise asked. I'm going home so I can let my parents know what happened to Sarah. I'll call Mr. Langston to inform him about what happened to Sarah. Emily stared at her friend Sarah in the ambulance in disbelief. She was so beaten up. Okay, Emily, I'll call you from the hospital, Denise. The paramedics transported Sarah with Denise in tow to the local hospital. Officer Dunleavy decided to transport Emily home as a precaution just in case Richard was still on the run. Emily was most appreciative to the Officer Dunleavy for transporting her home. Thanks, officer, for the lift. Officer Dunleavy thanked Emily. I'll get you home safely. Officer Dunleavy proceeded to transport Emily home safely. After dropping Emily off at home, Officer Dunleavy arrived to the Morris's household to question and possibly arrest Richard. The officer exited cruiser. He proceeded to the front door of the Morris's household. He knocked. Eddie Morris answered the door, unaware of his son Richard's fate. Hello, officer. Is there something wrong, sir? May I help you? Officer Dunleavy informed Eddie that he was looking for his son Richard. Hello, sir. I'm Officer Dunleavy. I'm looking for a Richard Morris. Does he live here? Eddie replied. He's my son, Officer Dunleavy. He lives here. What is it he's done? Officer Dunleavy responded to Eddie's question. I just need to ask your son a few questions about an incident that happened recently. Charlotte Morris peeked out of the kitchen. She noticed the officer questioning Eddie about their son, Richard. Eddie, why is the police at our door? What's going on? Emily, Eddie, with Richard, that we need to know about. The officer here wants to ask our son some questions about an incident involving him that happened recently. Questions? What kind of questions? Officer Dunleavy informed the Morrises. about their son's indiscretions involving Sarah Langston and what happened to her as she walked home from the courtyard. I have reason to believe that your son Richard was involved in a brutal assault and battery of a young woman earlier today as she walked home from school courtyard today. According to the young woman's friend, the victim was identified as Sarah Langston. I just want to ask your son a few questions about, okay, next page, Miss Langston and his involvement in her brutal beating. She was beaten so brutally, she was not recognizable. Shocked and frustrated, Eddie belligerently called for Richard to come downstairs when he learned from Officer Dunleavy about Sarah's condition. Sarah Langston, that's Richard's girlfriend. I'll call him downstairs right now. It would just take a moment, Officer Dunleavy. Eddie continued to call Richard. Richard, get your butt down here right now, boy. Right now. Richard came downstairs. He acted as though he was clueless. What's going on, Pop? What you call me down here for, Pop? What is that officer doing here? Eddie catches onto Richard and his clueless acts. Don't you get smart with me, boy. You know darn well what's going on. I'll knock you into the middle of the third week. The officer wants to ask you some questions about a brutal assault that occurred earlier today on your way home today. You better not lie either, boy. Officer Dunleavy assured Eddie that his son Richard wasn't going to be charged for the crime against at that point. He questioned Richard about the brutal assault on Sarah Langston. Your son hasn't been charged yet, Mr. Morris. Call me Eddie, Officer Dunleavy continued to ask Eddie permission to ask Richard questions about Sarah's brutal assault. Eddie, Mr. Morris, I would like to ask your son some questions about his girlfriend, Sarah Langston. Okay, Officer Dunleavy, you have my permission. Richard continued to act as though he was clueless about the facts and the problem he caused in Sarah's beating. Richard asked about Sarah's whereabouts. Sarah Langston, what happened to my girlfriend, Sarah? Officer Dunleavy immediately refreshed Richard's memory about his involvement and to the extent of the problem in which he caused in the brutal beating of his girlfriend, Sarah. She was brutally assaulted today after leaving the school courtyard on her way home. She was found later after under a bush just a few blocks from her house. She was severely and brutally beaten about the face, disfiguring it completely. Richard continued to deny he had any involvement with Sarah's brutal beating. Officer Dunleavy continued to grill Richard about Sarah's beating. You're telling me you don't know what happened to your girlfriend, Richard? Richard was nervous about being found out what he did to Sarah. Right before the officer Dunleavy, Richard lifted his right hand to rub the side of his face. Officer Dunleavy immediately noticed a fresh injury on Richard's right hand. No, officer, I don't know anything about a brutal assault on anyone. Officer Dunleavy quickly grabbed Richard by his right hand. What happened to your hand? Richard snatched his hand from the officer and placed it on his side. Oh, so you're telling me nothing? Richard waved his web of deceit to Officer Dunleavy about what happened to his right hand. I scraped it against my locker at school today. Officer Dunleavy became suspicious about Richard's reaction when he asked him what happened to his right hand. Oh, really? Are you sure that didn't happen on Sarah Langston's face? Richard became extremely belligerent as he continued to deny his involvement in Sarah's brutal beating once again. No, officer, I didn't beat up anyone, especially my girlfriend, Sarah. Officer Dunleavy immediately handcuffed Richard without hesitation. Well, that's just what I want to find out for sure. I'm going to take you down to the station just in case, because my report says otherwise. And Richard and I know what happened this morning at the school in front of Sarah Langston's locker. We'll talk about this later at the station. Okay, next page. Officer Dunleavy read Richard his Miranda rights. Richard Morris, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand your rights as I gave them to you, Richard Morris? Richard's hands were cuffed while his parents stood and watched as his rights was read to him. Richard was immediately taken from their household. Richard answered to his rights. Yeah, I understand my rights. Richard was placed in the back of Officer Dunleavy's cruiser. Eddie and Charlotte watched as their son was taken down to the police station for more questioning. All right, that was the end of chapter 5. I hope everyone appreciate what I've read. Chapter 5. I was very excited, once I read the entire chapter. I did a few glitches here and there, but please look over them. And I hope that everyone enjoyed me reading chapter 5 to everyone who, things like that. But I'm going to go ahead and end my conversation. I thank you for participating and supporting me. Thank you. I'm I'm going to say like, share, subscribe to my podcast. Hit that notification button to know when I go live. Ring that bell for updates on my podcast. Also, if you have a chatter letter that you want to send to me, send it to the Chatterbox Letters Podcast, Post Office Box 5556, Lakeland, Florida 33807. You can write anything you want in your letter, long if it's clean. Write your letters clear and discreet. And please do not hesitate to send your chatter letter. Procrastinate and send your chatter letter today. Thank you.